I can do is tell you about my approach. And I have a couple of interesting aspects to the way I like to practice. First of all, as a mediator, I believe the best definition is assisted negotiation, which means that the parties are negotiating with each other. I'm there to assist them. And one of the ways I can be most effective in assisting them is if I have met with them in advance, a day before, a week before. I go to the law office if a lawyer is involved of each side. It's their time to educate me about their view of the matter. They do it on their turf, on their timetable. I prefer to do this in all complex, emotionally charged, sometimes multi-party issues. I learned to do this in commercial matters, real estate matters, and I have found that it is invaluable. Partly because it lets each party get to know the mediator. It also lets the mediator get to know the parties. And mutual trust is so important in the role of a mediator. It also lets me begin one of my three functions as a mediator. Function one, facilitation, flexibility about the process, but focused on a result on the day of the mediation. But secondly, coaching, which is done confidentially with each side, separately, privately. And I can begin that coaching role when I meet with the parties in advance. This is not the way many mediators approach things. They will often begin with a joint session. I like to begin with these separate sessions. And often I can ask pointed questions that emerge from the discussion. Sometimes it means they need to do or want to do some homework before the joint session. It also gives the mediator a chance to think, which I think is a really good thing to do. And in the employment setting, to think particularly about issues like, well, should these parties be in the same room? If this is a sexual harassment case, is that an issue? If so, I'm going to discuss it with both sides ahead of time. So that's one thing that kind of sets me a little bit apart from many mediators. What that then lets me do is something that also sets me a little bit apart. I like to let the joint session go somewhat longer than many mediators, I understand, like to do. Some of them like to have brief opening statements, a little bit of dialogue, and separate the parties, and do then the shuttle diplomacy, horse trading, to try to come to as quick and effective a result as possible. I like to let the dialogue across the table continue, even if it results in some heat, because I've learned that heated moments can be educational moments, that heat can produce some light. People can see things in a new way. They listen to the other party with the assistance of the mediator, hopefully in a way that lets them understand what's being said and hear it in a way that then says, is there a way I can accommodate to that in some manner that doesn't undermine my own fundamental interests? So, like most mediators, I'm going to try to get the parties to go to the issues of interests, but I like to have the issues clarified in the dialogue. So even if the lawyers are saying, I think we should break now, it's getting a little hot here, I'll say, well, let's just hang on a while. The third role I play is an evaluative role. Some mediators really pull back from that, but I've learned that I believe when I'm retained to mediate a complex case, the parties are paying me in part to invite me to provide an evaluation to them. I do this jointly. I mean, I ask them jointly if they would like me to do that. I will be doing it privately and in the caucus sessions with each side, but usually in a dialogue format. As opposed to saying, I think this, this, and this, I will say, well, how do you evaluate credibility? Or how do you evaluate your chances at summary judgment? Or what about this complex legal issue? What are your chances on that? So we get into a kind of a risk analysis mode of thinking, and of, you know, at some point they'll say, well, what's your risk assessment? And I will push back to them and say, well, you know, let's think in terms of ranges. I really avoid putting a specific number or terms out there, but I will say, what about this, what about that? And this comes from my basic philosophy that this is assisted negotiation. It's for the parties to negotiate. Having had those private meetings, that joint session, they don't have to waste any time educating the mediator. I'm fully educated. They can just go at the negotiations. And my experience is that people respond to that process.